All right. Hi, everybody. And depending on where you are joining us from in the world, good morning or good afternoon or good evening. I am Yael Fitzpatrick, and I'm really excited to be moderating this opening session on equity and inclusion in publishing. So we're going to start with Brittany Griffiths from DePaul University, presenting on the rhetoric of hybrid publishing, negotiating legitimacy and stigma in the modern publishing landscape. Then the second presentation will be from Daniella Thoren and Jennifer Regala from Wolters Kluwer, with their presentation, Equity at the Editorial Table, Rethinking Board Policies for Inclusive Ethical Publishing. And then we're going to round out the session with two remote presenters, Jolie Hale and Dianne Wade, who are down at the University of South Carolina Press. And they're going to be presenting on the primary beneficiary, equity in publishing internships.
Wonderful. Thank you, John, and thank you, Yael, for the introduction, and to George Washington University for having this conference. My name is Brittany Griffiths. I am a senior at DePaul University, and this research was born out of a grant that I received this summer undergraduate research grant. And I work in hybrid publishing. That is my full-time job. I'm the senior manager of operations at Brown Books Publishing Group in Dallas, Texas. And this is a question that's been on my mind for many years now, is just understanding what hybrid publishing is in terms of the broader publishing landscape, and also understanding what others think about it and how we talk about it. So let's begin with a simple premise. The publishing industry is notoriously opaque. I think we can all probably attest to that. And what I mean by that is that authors typically don't have an inside look at how production works, how distribution works, and predominantly how sales works. So part of what I did with my research is trying to investigate, how people use language to describe hybrid publishing. So I can start with what hybrid publishing is not, and that is it's not traditional publishing and it's not self-publishing. It falls somewhere in between. It's not a publisher of both traditional and self-published titles, which is sometimes what people misconstrue hybrid as. It's not vanity publishing, which is something that comes up in online forums very frequently, and I'll get into that in a little bit. And it's not a publishing services model because we offer distribution and we manage sales. It's also not a dual format between print and digital. Sometimes people think when we say hybrid publishing, we mean it appears in a digital format or it appears in a print format. And that is not what we're talking about with hybrid publishing. And it is not a shortcut to being published. It ties back into the vanity publishing moniker, but we do not cut corners when we're trying to get a book to market. And it is not free. So that is kind of the crux of this whole conversation. So what is a hybrid publisher? It operates somewhere in the middle ground between traditional publishing and self-publishing. It incorporates elements of both. So the author is involved in the production process. They have stake, not only financially, but creatively in the project. And unlike self-publishing services companies, reputable hybrid publishers do vet their submissions. We maintain editorial integrity and we abide by production standards. So the goal is to essentially be seamless and to be able to not tell the difference between a traditionally published book and a hybrid published book. And the IBPA has done some amazing work in really trying to lay out some points of criteria to identify what a hybrid publisher is. So I've listed this here. This is on the IBPA's website, and it's sort of the foundation for which I've used to describe what hybrid publishing is. As you can see here, it's some of the elements that I've mentioned before. All hybrid publishers that are functioning accept payment from authors. It's an author subsidized model. So the authors have capital stake in bringing the book to market. Now, typically in a traditional model, obviously we know that traditional publishers are funding the project. They are investing in the project, whether that's through an agent or if they're picking up the author on their own, but they're investing in production to bring the book to market. So hybrid publishing has emerged as a disruptive force in today's literary landscape. It challenges traditional notions of legitimacy, authorship, and also artistic authority. So how do we study the way people talk about ideas? That's what Rhetoric is, right? We're looking at the language used and the conversations people are having to talk about ideas and concepts. So my project over the summer was sort of divided into three parts. I conducted a literature review and looked at some not only industry-related texts, but also some online forums through digital ethnography. And then I also conducted 39 industry interviews with a variety of different publishing professionals. So when we take a look at what the book is, the book has been around for a very long time as an object. The publishing industry has developed over time, and it is now what we have today. I think people often harken back to the publishing industry as it was in the 50s and 60s, a sort of golden age of publishing, where publishers were able to invest large amounts of capital in acquiring titles and bringing those to market. The industry has changed a lot in the last 50 to 60 years, and a lot of that has been propped up by digital platforms. Like KDP, for example, has provided authors a completely different avenue for bringing their books to readers. So I think a lot of this negative rhetoric around hybrid publishing has sort of emerged from this idea, the romanticism of the publishing industry, of getting picked up by a traditional publisher and having your book legitimized or valued in that way. So one of the things that I wanted to do was really understand like how we make meaning when we talk about hybrid publishing or traditional publishing or even self-publishing. I think the book is perceived as sort of this rare and culturally cherished object, and it's sort of informed the mystique of traditional publishing and authors' desires to have their work chosen. Hybrid publishing shifts the capital risk away from the publisher, the traditional publisher, and it moves it back to the author. And it requires them to invest in the production and the distribution, and it also gives them a lot more marketing control over their work. And they're able to retain a high creative and financial control. But because authors in hybrid contracts, they're required to front the capital to produce and promote the book, there's a lot of questions that have arisen around the ethics of paying for your book to be published, and also the return on investment. So here's some of the reasons that I've spoken with people about why they go hybrid. Obviously, I work at a hybrid publisher, and so I speak with authors every day. And there's a myriad of different reasons why someone might want to go hybrid. It's not just a matter of not getting their book picked up by an agent, which does happen. But a lot of people are really concerned with creative control over their work. This is their baby. This is something they've spent years writing, and they really want to have input, whether it's on cover design, sometimes even typography and the layout of the book. But they're also really concerned about how it's presented to the market and who the readers are that they're trying to reach. They also want higher royalties. I think typically authors don't have a lot of insight into how sales works and how the distribution network is constructed. And sometimes even people in the publishing industry don't know. I know it's been a huge learning curve for me myself, stepping into the distribution side of things and trying to understand how our books reach market. And so I've provided a quote here, which kind of sums up what I was saying about some of the chief advantages of the hybrid model for those who choose it is control, timing, rights, the outcome of the product itself. But the chief barrier is the barrier to entry with income, because it does take a lot of money to bring a book to market. So I think when I started this research, I was under the impression that traditional publishers or industry professionals were really the ones sort of holding the hybrid model back. And I think the most surprising thing to me in this is that it's not the case. Most of the folks that I've talked with who work in publishing, whether traditional, hybrid, or are consultants who help authors, they're already here. They're ready for hybrid publishing. It's been talked about for probably about the last decade. The IBPA has done great work. We have a lot of people in the industry really pushing to set ethical standards for hybrid publishers. I think the digital ethnography component of this really opened my eyes, because it seems to me that authors are really the ones kind of holding this model back. So I took a look at digital platforms like Reddit and Instagram. I spent a lot of time on various subreddits, whether it's our writers or self-publishing. And I found something really interesting, and that's anytime hybrid publishing would come up on the digital platforms, people would immediately jump on and just start tearing it apart. I looked at about 39 Reddit posts over the last 4 years. There was even one going all the way back 15 years ago. And I also looked at hybrid publishers' websites. And these are some of the words that hybrid publishers use to describe hybrid publishing. So you can see here, it's really built around relationships or next generation, forward thinking, shared mentorship, author-centric. So this is how hybrid publishers view themselves versus how authors view hybrid publishers. So this is one of my favorites that I found on the R Writers subreddit. And, just an honest question, not trying to create conflict. So this person already knew sort of how this forum worked and what to expect. But they were asking an honest question about why people have this viewpoint of hybrid publishing as somehow unethical or taking advantage or predatory. And so I've highlighted some of the responses here from this one particular post. And again, there's 39 more like it. But you can see here some of the words that are used. So scam is a frequent word that comes up. Dishonest. You can see the fluid use of air quotes here for publishers and hybrid publishing. Vanity press, prey, hybrid publishers again, scam. And one of the things I thought was really interesting, there was an astute comment talking about like self-publishing isn't the height of vanity, right? And I would say that everyone wants to get their book published, right? Anyone who writes a book wants to get it published. I don't know if that necessarily means that you're vain in any way. And so the fact that the word vanity comes up in publishing at all is sort of like a misnomer, right? Like, of course, if you write a book and you want to get out to market, why would that be vain in any way? You're a writer, that's what you do. And again, some additional comments here about vanity presses. So this is something that I really tried to get to the bottom of, is why people associate hybrid publishing with vanity publishing. And it seems to me that it comes down to the money, right? Someone paying to publish is somehow doing something wrong or unethical because they want their book to be read. And I uncovered this term I had not heard before. It's called Yogg's Law. And it's been kind of promulgated across the internet for many years now, but essentially what it comes down to is that the money should always flow from the publisher to the author. And it seems to be kind of the hang up for a lot of authors, is that anytime that they have an opportunity to get published and they have to pay, they immediately think that it is a scam. So this is a list of headers from different Reddit posts that I've come across here. So you can see it is a contested topic in this space. And so the third part of my research really came down to industry interviews. And I spoke with about 39 different industry professionals, people who were publishers, hybrid publishers, traditional publishers, authors who had both been traditionally published and also published by hybrid publishers. And then I also spoke with editors and people who worked in production. I think the glaring hole in my research is that I could not get any agents on the phone. And I think that agents are one of the last strongholds for the traditional publishing industry. They still play a sort of gatekeeping role because a lot of authors cannot get published traditionally without an agent. So an agent has to sort of check off on your work and say, yes, I support this, I'm willing to back it, I'm willing to try and get you published. So I took an oral history approach here. I conducted hour-long interviews with 39 different industry professionals. I reached out through my own network. I reached out through platforms like Instagram, the XOXO Publishing forum, and I was able to get a broad group of individuals who were all so wonderful and supportive and very open about talking about this topic. So I have the breakdown of the sort of places in the industry that people worked. As you can see here, 5% of people I talked to are traditionally published, 5% self-published authors, and then predominantly 18% were hybrid published authors. So what does all of this mean, especially in light of a conference on publishing ethics? So I think we're past the point now where hybrid publishing is going to go away. I think it's here to stay. We have new hybrid publishers popping up every year, and we have a lot who have been around for many years and who are doing really great work and doing work educating authors. And I think that is really the forefront of what hybrid publishing does that traditional publishing does not, and what kind of pushes us past this question of ethics is that many hybrid publishers really want authors to understand how the publishing industry works. Typically, that means you're forming a relationship with the author and you're really kind of hand-holding them through the process. I've appreciated that element of hybrid publishing more than anything else. I come from a hybrid library publishing background, and I've done some work in traditional, but the relationships that I've built with authors through hybrid publishing, I think has been essential to me in my growth in the publishing industry and understanding how and why people publish books or want their books published. One of the key takeaways is obviously that the authors themselves, I think, are still not fully on board with the hybrid model. There's a lot of online skepticism around this, and it's driven by that idea of Young's Law, where the money should always flow from publisher to author. And then lastly, ethical hybrids are transparent. They really are. They're working to try and explain to authors how the process works, what they need to do. And predominantly, I think a lot of the really ethical hybrid publishers are explaining to authors that it is very challenging to sell books. I think that is one of the hardest things to do. You can make a great book all day, but it's very difficult to sell books. And so authors coming into the publishing industry really need to understand that, and they need to be fully behind their book. If they don't believe in their book, who else will, you know? And so I think that that's been one of the biggest takeaways for me working in hybrid publishing, is seeing authors sort of track that logic and then take that out to market, whether it's having really robust tour schedules or marketing campaigns to try and get their books noticed, because it is a competitive industry. I'm not sure what the last count was, but I think we had around 2 million books published last year. It's a lot of books. So trying to compete with not only other books in the industry, but other media is challenging. And I think that that expectation of ROI is really what sort of has led to some of the negative rhetoric around hybrid publishing. I've provided some references here. I have an early report from my research that is online. You can find that on my LinkedIn. But I'm hoping to develop this a little bit further out and pull from the interviews that I've taken to write a long form essay that really breaks down some more statistics around this topic. And so I would love to follow up with you guys later and share that once it's done. But thank you all.
I'm Jennifer Regala, and this is my work bestie, partner in crime, Daniella Thoren. We work at Wolters Kluwer Health, based out of Philly. And we are here to present to you about equity at the editorial table, rethinking board policies for inclusive, ethical publishing. So this is a picture of the two of us. So we really do enjoy working together, but we also thrive overseeing two teams that are very similar to one another and unique to what Wolters Kluwer Health does generally. Our titles are part of the health publishing team, but they kind of sit off to the side as well, because we have a lot of opportunity to distribute content accessibly and globally. And of course, you know, we are primarily print and written articles. But then from there, we also have a lot of derivative content that is related to our publication. So think podcasts, think webinars, think meetings. And those meetings can be virtual, they could be in person. So what we do is a little bit unique to the organization, and I think that's important to, you know, considering what we are going to be talking about today. I'm just going to share a little bit about my background, and so does Daniella, so that we can, you know, explain why we feel that we are able to lead this conversation. We don't have all the answers, and we do also challenge anyone who believes that they have all the answers to probably think that they don't. I think anytime you think that, that's a dangerous territory to be in, but we do know enough to ask the right questions. So what we came to this, you know, when it came to writing this proposal, thinking about what does, you know, ethical editorial board leadership look like? So I've been in publishing. I know you guys probably think I'm 21 years old, but in scholarly publishing for over 25 years now. And in that time, I've seen a lot of editorial boards. I've seen a lot of different kinds of journals. I've seen them in any subject matter. from science to social science to medicine, you name it. And I've seen a lot of editorial board leadership. And I've also seen a lot of different kinds of publications that I've worked with. Right now, I do oversee news publications that are not peer reviewed, but they still do have editorial board leadership. And there is some form of peer review light, so that editorial leadership is a little different than maybe a peer reviewed ed board looks like. But just, asking you to, consider our backgrounds and, again, why we wanted to talk about this today. Daniella, off to you.
Okay, so yes, I'm Daniella Thoren. I've actually been at Walters Kluwer. I am 21. And so I was born there. I've been at Walters Kluwer over 20 years, and my background differs from Jennifer's in many, many ways, but I have primarily worked with proprietary titles and longstanding proprietary titles. And what that's given me as far as this talk is I've seen a lot of editors, I've seen a lot of editorial boards, and I've also seen the change in publishing.
What are we going to talk about today? We want to focus on the editorial board of any publication. And like I said, any peer-reviewed publication, magazine, news style. If you have an editorial board, it's really important that you have the key people on that board and you are giving them the key input to set the intellectual tone, the values, and the standards of those scholarly journals. I think the most important question that you can ask when you are working with an editorial board is, what is an XXX journal? And that actually sounds bad. I did not mean it like that. Well, wait. Okay, so let's just call it the Journal of Pink. What is a Journal of Pink article? We're at 15. Does that mean? Okay. So what does that mean? And really understanding the value of your publication. We're coming here to the end of our time already, so I just want to make sure we stay on track. Oh, we have 15 left?
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay. We're all flustered here, but we're gonna pull it together. Okay, so when you're thinking about that, what is the Journal of Pink? What does the Journal of Pink want to be publishing? What are the values of that publication? What's the mission of that journal? Are you trying to be, I mean, I hate to say it, some journals are trying to be high impact. Some journals are trying to make money. Some journals, though, have mission and values. And I think that's where we want to be thinking about today and why that's so important. So how do you do that? Board composition, board policies, and then thinking about how we define and encourage that inclusive representation. And that inclusivity does include gender, race, geography, career stage, institution type, area of specialty, and so much more. And again, if you rest on your laurels and say, we have all of those things defined and we have perfect representation, once again, you're never going to check that box, and you should never think that you have. So with that, do you want to take over the rest of the bullets on this?
Sure. I think the biggest thing when you have, when you're thinking in terms of ethics and the makeup of your board, as Jennifer was saying, it's really important to look at that mission statement and make sure that you are covering areas that your readers, that represent your readership. For example, on one of my titles, we realized we had nobody under the age of like 50, 55, and we had nobody that was not in academia. So I should say that I work on several nursing titles. There are career nurses, just getting out of school, in school, second career. There's a whole range of people that were not being represented on that editorial board. So it is very important when you are working usually with an editor and building your board to look back at that mission statement and make sure that you are covering your readership, because it can get really narrow really fast. And anybody that's worked with an editorial board, there's sometimes politics involved, there's always ego involved, and some of these conversations are tough. So what we wanted to talk about today, instead of just throwing out, let's have an ethical board, what does that really mean? And as we'll talk about a little bit more, having a framework that everybody understands from the beginning makes it much easier to have a conversation because it's written out and the board member is either following it or they're not. Even the editor-in-chief, they're either following it or they're not. And that basic framework, I was trying to think of a clever, like, I don't know, is the word acronym for it, but it's TAE and then it sounded like TAE and I was like, that doesn't make sense. But basically a simple framework, and you can always build your own, would be transparency, accountability, and your ethics. And what that means to that particular board. If you define that with your board, I've onboarded several new editors. It's very helpful for them because they are often stepping into a role that was held by somebody for decades sometimes, and they're a little nervous. If you have a framework, it's almost like a checklist, and you're making sure that you're following those. Like I said, those conversations are easy to have. You know, as Jennifer was mentioning, what diversity and ethics include on your board, the reason to do that is several, but you really want to look at your outcomes from that. Your outcomes will be representation. Basically, you're representing the end user, which would be your readers. But you're also developing a better peer review process as well, because you have people that are filling in the different spaces there. So you don't have, you know, one set of, like I mentioned, academia and nobody that works in a clinical setting that could actually speak to some of the realities that maybe these articles are not covering, or someone in academia that hasn't practiced in, say, nursing in 10 years. They really don't know what's, you know, what it's really like out there in the hospital setting or primary care setting. So by following you know, representation and making sure that you're covering that, you will have better peer reviews. Processes and decisions, like I mentioned, the topics that you cover, and you also avoid publication bias when you have a more diverse editorial board. For today's goal, we wanted to give a easy to-do list, like I mentioned, to consider if you're feeling like your editorial board needs at least a review, needs at least a look at, and maybe revise the composition of your board, and maybe revise also your policies so that you're embedding those principles, like I mentioned, transparency, accountability, and equity in your publication. So today we're going to be a little more interactive, and not that we haven't already been exciting, by doing case studies and seeing what you might do in your board. These are very common scenarios that I've seen a million times, and what having that framework could do, that you could revise how you would handle it, or that you might revise a policy. And then just the last bullet there, you know, for this whole conference, really, we talk about ethics in abstract terms, but really we all have sort of our definition of what that is. Today, we're going to put ourselves in an editor's chair and talk about these real life moments. You know, we're people, we have to have hard conversations sometimes. There are often people that need to probably get off the board. There's editors that, you know, only pick their friends, etc. So, you know, how do you really deal with those real life moments, and where your leadership in guiding this board and the editor, and integrity, which you've already defined for yourself, where those collide?
So, story one. First of all, biggest pet peeve is this is how we've always done it. You could tell me that, and even if that's the right way to do it, I am immediately suspicious that that's not it. But the first scenario we want to ask you all about is a new editor-in-chief inherits a board where every member has served for more than a decade. Meetings are perfunctory. So by that, though, meaning it's just, here's a bunch of peer review statistics. Here's how many papers we accepted this year. It's an hour long. They never talk again until the next year. Maybe they have coffee. Maybe they have pastries. Maybe they're lucky enough to have some hot scrambled eggs. Meeting's over. Decisions are okay, like you don't understand how they're happening, why a paper is accepted, why is it a Journal of Pink paper to begin with, and there's just no voices included whatsoever. And that begins to trickle down to the peer review process, to authorship, etc. I can tell you in my own career, I have walked into this room here many times with representation that looks like this, and even in the year 2025. And it's not just that physical look. It is like, for instance, I walked into one ed board where almost every single editor on the board was from Vanderbilt University, because the editor-in-chief was from Vanderbilt University. So there was no geographic diversity, there was no career stage diversity, etc. That's just one example. So question number one for the audience is, have you all ever walked into an editorial, if you're, in the journals or magazine or news space, have you ever walked into an ed board situation that looks like this one? Show of hands. Yes, okay, I see some hands. Okay, good. That was our suspicion, and that is, what we're working hard to overcome. Daniella mentioned she had been at Wolters Kluwer for many years. I've only been there for just over a year, and walked into, a bunch of publications where the representation was not diverse in a number of ways, and how, thinking about how to include the voices that belong. And I'll give you some examples. Emergency Medicine News is one of my publications, and we just had, the same old people who had been on that board for, I don't know, about 20 years probably. There's not just emergency medicine physicians, though, that work in emergency medicine. There's pharmacists, there's advanced practice providers, there's nurses, there's patients involved in this. And how do you make sure all of those voices are covered? First thing to do there is to say to the editor-in-chief, hey, editor-in-chief, we've got to shake this up and get that buy-in from that editor. And then one last note I want to make, because we're getting our warning sign on time, and thank you so much for doing that for us, Daniella mentioned proprietary titles versus, are you partnering with some other organization? Proprietary to us at Wolters Kluwer means a publication that Wolters Kluwer owns. And I have to say, those are very fun for Daniella and I to work on, because then we run the ed boards and we call the shots, and it works. This allows us to, institute these inclusive practices. If there is a society partnership involved, so in our case, we publish medical publications. If there's a society, we do have to get that society buy-in. So you need to look at, too, who in your organization is involved in making sure that those decisions are made. So Daniella, do you want to do story 2 for us?
I will, but I just want to mention for that last story, and I'm interested to talk to people afterwards to hear theirs. Again, that framework, their name are on there. I've had people that didn't even know they were on the board. There's people on competing publications. I mean, it's wild out there. So making sure that people understand what is expected of them is huge. It sounds, basic, but a lot of times they don't know. And it's because an editor has been there a long time. They're all friends or from the same university, and it's more of like my name's on here, I put it on my CV, but they're not actually doing anything. Letting them know, holding them accountable is the way to go there. And then for your equity, the equity piece of that framework, do all these 20 people really represent your readership now, 20 years later? Did when they started, are those people retired now? Have you taken a look at anything? Having that conversation as well. And policy-wise, we love the term a rotating board, because you can be rotated right off if you're not meeting these expectations, which we have explained when you first agreed to be on the board. That was life-changing on several journals. Having like I said, a framework to point to, then everybody has the same expectations. And if you're not meeting them, you shouldn't be surprised if you're not invited back. It's not a friend thing. It's about these journals and meeting readership, especially like Jennifer mentioned, proprietary titles that are not tied to a society, that it's our job to protect Wolters Kluwer properties and make sure that they are staying up with the times and not, letting a board that just kind of sit there and do nothing and let this publication not be the best that it could be. Okay, story 2. The new EIC, editor-in-chief, obviously, well, we're not doing it this way any longer. Imagine the new EIC applies a new framework. What would that look like? Okay, we have 1 minute left, so think about it in your head quickly. Again, I mentioned the framework. I forgot this was story 2. Transparency, accountability, equity on your board. That is the framework that I live by, and it's worked very well at keeping boards accountable, keeping editors accountable, and everybody knowing what's expected of them.
Okay, so we have just a quick to-do list for you guys, and then we do encourage conversation in the chat and conversation outside in this beautiful lobby for those who are here. Back to the question, what is this time I said XYZ, so, or the Journal of Pink, that's the journal we'll be launching. What type of publication do you have, and understanding that publication and who's involved with it? Who are the primary consumers, secondary consumers, and are there more people you want to access that content? And to me, the more people accessing your content in a way that is meaningful to them, the better. Getting that organizational buy-in, if it's a proprietary title, if it's a society partner title, or whoever is in charge of that title, making sure that those powers who be are involved in that. And then involving every single one of these people in the process and making them involved in that success. So I think that gets us right in a minute. Follow us on LinkedIn, email us, and we're always here to talk.
Good morning. My name is Jolie Hale. I'm with the University of South Carolina Press. I handle rights and contracts and also human resources and intern supervision, which is why I am part of this discussion on equity in publishing internships. My background before coming to USC Press was in literary agencies primarily, so that's where my internship experience comes from. And Dianne is my colleague here at USC Press. She is marketing assistant and the brain and the heart behind our internship program as it exists today, which is a paid internship program. Dianne, would you like to go ahead and tell them about some of your background as well?
Absolutely. So, like Jolie said, I'm the marketing assistant here at the University of South Carolina. And I had always wanted to work in publishing. I didn't always know what that looked like. For a long time, it was just books. I just want to work with books. But I got very lucky with the University of Delaware, where I received my master's. In my second year, I had a graduate student assistantship with the University of Delaware Press. And in my last semester, the spring semester before I graduated, I was the social media intern for a small boutique press in Philadelphia called The Head and the Hand. And if any of you live around or in Philadelphia, you should definitely visit their bookstore. It is adorable. And so I graduated with my master's in 2019, and I had to move back home because wouldn't you believe it, you don't make a lot of money in a graduate program. So I couldn't stay on the East Coast. So I had to move back home to Oklahoma. And for the next 5 years, from 2019 till 2023, I tried to break into the publishing industry. A lot of job apps, a lot of reaching out, informational interviews, regular interviews, until I got to the University of South Carolina Press as the marketing assistant. I had a very good conversation with our director here and then our then marketing director, Kathy Esposito. So I've been here since November 8th of 2023.
Thank you. So I'm gonna ask you to speak to how our internship program here at USC Press got to the way it is today, since you were the driving force behind it and I just help administer it. Could you talk about how many interns we typically have at any given time and who's eligible for it as a starting point?
Yes, absolutely. So at any given time, we have between 2 and 3 undergraduate students. We just made that a third position, a regularly reoccurring position is our publishing intern who works under Jolie now. So we'll have an acquisitions intern, a publishing intern, and a marketing intern. And then we do have a graduate student position, and they are a full year instead of just one semester. And that is with partnership with the College of Information and Communication in the master's program there. And when I got here, I was partially trained by one of our marketing interns. Her name was Claire. She was very sweet, very ambitious, very smart. And I wanted to learn more about what the internship was like for her here at the press. And just from asking around, I learned that it's not a paid program at the time. And they got a lot of their students, like they didn't have a very like wide reach with the campus. Our offices are like a 20-minute walk away from campus. We're not directly on site. So we don't have that brand recognition right there. So a lot of our students were coming only from the English department and even further still, mostly just from the Honors College. So the University of South Carolina has this yearly 24-hour fundraiser, and it's called Give for Garnet. And we got this email in, I would say, yeah, like November, December, just before we went for Christmas break. Jolie and I had only been here for 4 weeks. And we wanted to participate. And just based off of everything that I had been through, like I said, I had just finished 5 years of trying to break into publishing. I built a relationship with our current intern at the time. I'm also a former first generation student. I was a former McNair scholar, which is partially how I got into the University of Delaware. I knew that there were a lot of students who would do well in this position who just didn't have the access, they didn't have the resources to take on an unpaid internship, to go a full semester. So what is that? Almost 5 months without a paycheck to do something good for their career, but they also, there's still groceries to buy, there's still gas to buy, there's still rent to pay. So for that fundraiser, I decided we should fundraise to pay our interns. And I was very happy to have the support of the press behind me. So that's kind of where it all started.
Yeah, before that change to a paid internship, we were getting, or so I understand, because you and I were both pretty new to the press when this transition started. We were getting good candidates for the internship program. We had wonderful students here. We hope that we were providing a good experience for them, a really good learning experience, and career support. And I see in the chat that someone here at the event today hired a former USC Press intern. So they are finding their way. But by changing to a paid internship model, we were able to attract more applicants, but also to do so with an eye towards equity, towards ensuring that applicants who needed the paycheck, who couldn't afford to spend 10 hours a week unpaid, could access this internship program. So the fundraising piece of it is how we are funding our internship. Could you speak a little to the connection between the fundraising effort and our mission at the press, as well as the university's mission?
Yeah, so um our our mission is to publish authentic stories that facilitate just good conversation. And that is part of what USC says that they stand for. It is what leads us to publish the types of books that we do, especially in the current climate that we are all living in. I'm really proud of the way we treat our authors and their stories. And if we're going to, and in my mind, if that is how we are going to conduct ourselves as a press towards our authors and their authentic stories, their real histories, and giving dignity to their real struggles of the lives that they've led, the things that they've had to go through. It's more than just doing that for our books. It's doing that for each other as colleagues. And it's also doing that for our students who have the opportunity to work with us. Not a lot of university presses have undergraduate internships. For most of them, it's for grad students, early career professionals, and even still not very many of them are paid. I sort of understand UPs are in that weird spot of not being a true for-profit business, so we kind of straddle the line of the nonprofit, but still have to make a little bit of a profit. So, we're not Penguin sitting on millions and millions of dollars in our back pocket to, pay our students. And so that's where the fundraising comes in, but also the mission behind it of specifically reaching the students who could benefit the most from this internship. And the only way to do that is to pay them. The only way to give them that opportunity is to understand where they start at. It's not even just in paying them. If you go to our website under our careers page and scroll down to where we talk about our internships, we list out what our requirements are, which is a resume, a cover letter, and a writing sample. Well, having been a former first generation student, one of the things that I remember that was a constant area of frustration was people using language like everybody just knew what they were saying and not taking, and then I felt dumb. So I didn't want to ask what everybody else seemed to just know. And I'm very, very grateful for the McNair program because that is what they are built for, is to get first generation underprivileged students on a more equal playing field. So I made it where, okay, it's not just paying our students, it's also understanding the students that we want to go after, they're going to need that help. The same help that I needed, they need. So we explain what we mean in our job apps. So what do I mean by a writing sample? We have them bulleted out because I'm reaching out specifically to the director of the First Generation Center here at the University of South Carolina. Her name is Lene Budden. She is a wonderful woman who has done wonderful things for the campus in just 2 years with beginning the First Generation Center. They have their own dorm room. She does amazing work. I reach out personally to her because the other thing is too, those students in that demographic, they don't know what they don't know. I can remember I didn't know that office hours meant that you could just walk into the professor's office and ask a question. I didn't really know that they wanted you to do that. They need the extra hand holding. So it's not just, okay, our internship is paid. It's also going the extra step to meet them where they're at. And that's reaching out to the First Generation Center director who has a direct line to the students who need the most help, who would do wonderfully here, and reaching out to them. It's reaching out to the TRIO program director, which is where McNair falls under, and a couple other programs to help underprivileged students they fall under, reaching out specifically to the Career Center so that they know you need to pass this along to the students who aren't going to take a chance, because the sad thing that happens to students who are constantly feel like, oh, I don't know what that is. it becomes well, I guess that's just not for me. They don't mean me. And so it's on us if we are going to stand by the tenets of dignity and authenticity. It's on us to do the reach out.
Yeah, and it seems like there is more awareness and more of a commitment at the university broadly to reach out to first generation students in particular to provide them the resources they need. So we've been able to tie into that from the press and to benefit from those resources and the knowledge that the First Gen Center has. Are there other important ways that are there other strategies for reaching the candidates that we want to reach with a goal of increasing equity and diversity in publishing?
I think that the other thing is really utilizing the social media space. Of course, we're on Handshake where all the students are. We're all over social media. We encourage the students to tell their friends who might want to apply. From there we go like by word of mouth. I know that our acquisitions director, Aurora Bell, she has direct line to like actual professors and so, if you have people, have them apply. So yeah, by word of mouth then becomes the next thing. The social media space, go where the students are, really.
Right. So we only have a few minutes left, but maybe you could talk about your goals for this internship program going forward and what you would like to see happening in the next few years.
Absolutely. One of the things that I'm proud of is we've turned this internship into it is truly a learning experience, a learning and job experience. All of our students are doing real work. Any book that you get from the University of South Carolina Press has been touched by a student, whether it's in acquisitions with formatting the actual manuscripts, to our publishing interns helping Jolie with rights and contracts, to my marketing intern who is helping me build the graphics for our social media campaigns, who's writing the pitch emails and a press release to send to a podcast interviewer. Then I can speak for my students. When they leave me, they get a letter of recommendation. I put together their pitch email and their press release into one format so that they have a writing sample to give to whatever job application they want to apply to afterwards, whether it's in publishing or not. They have that going forward, because one of the other struggles that I had to deal with in that 5-year long span of job hunting was not having any materials to support myself, because I left school and I didn't leave with materials. So I know how hard that is. And we typically hire juniors and seniors because this is a job prep program. 6 months down the line, I might not remember what Malaya did back in the spring of 2025. She doesn't have to worry about that because I sent her away with it. One of the other things we do that I'm really proud of is something between Aurora and Jolie, where they do a resume and job app workshop, where our students get in the moment direct feedback on applying for a publishing job or whatever job that they are looking at. They get direct feedback from us or from Aurora and Jolie during that, I think 2-hour workshop. They write a cover letter and a resume. And my hope, this is also a goal of mine just in my own career, is to build a wider network of other publishing professionals, because my hope is to be somebody to help my students break into publishing. This is, if we're sitting here, we're going to have this whole conference on ethics and inclusion in publishing. One of the things that we have got to understand is that publishing is a hard career field to break into. It's very slow moving. It's all centered on the East Coast primarily. And so a kid from Podunk, Oklahoma is going to have a harder time breaking into publishing, but maybe that person has a voice that could bring something new. And there's something that we could all be doing to break down the barriers of getting into publishing. And one of the ways that I would like to try is to broaden my network and then pass that network on to my students who also would like to be in this career field, whether it's in marketing or otherwise.
Yeah, hint, hint to the audience, stay in touch with us after this, after this session. I think we're out of time, Diane. Thank you so much. It's always wonderful to hear from you about this program.
Yeah, I'm very proud of it. So I'm very happy to be part of this conference.
Same.
Let's just give another big round for our fabulous panelists here in South Carolina. So just to keep us logistically in with a goal of not blowing the schedule completely out of the water, we're gonna have to restrict some questions for this session, but of course, please approach our panelists afterwards. I know that this was a really inspiring session. I'm just gonna kick off one question for everybody here in the room and down south. And that is maybe a little bit philosophical, but given that we're unquestionably in a really big change, period of change right now, both socially and politically, how do you stay grounded with all of this, with all of what's going on? How do you navigate all of this change?
I think community is the answer. I think this community that John and Pooja and George Washington have put together, that's one spot. SSP, CSE, look at who sponsored this meeting. And just look around you, and it is hard to get into publishing, it's hard to stay in publishing. But I just look at this room, I look at so many friends here, friends on, this panel, and I think that's the key, and to learn from one another. I'm sitting in the front row here, and Anna Lewis, my mentee from SSP Fellowship Program, I'm really her mentee, and that's one perfect example. She's texting me and saying, great job, and that's what we need right now, and that's what we always need, and that's how we're all going to be better.
I think for me, it's living intentionally. So instead of getting worked up about all of society and losing your mind, be effective in your own life. If you don't like what's going on, like I said, globally, nationally, you really don't have control over that. But you do have control over people in your life. You do have control over whether or not you're going to give back to, as Jennifer said, community. As Dianne was talking about her internship program, she made a big difference, and she's going to change a lot of lives by putting that into place. So we might not be able to, do anything on what we think is a big scale, but I think it's a big deal to change lives and be the person that you want to be. So that's how I stay grounded. Jennifer knows, because I'm usually pretty calm. I just don't let things get to me like that. I stay focused on my life, my world, and what I can do to affect change.
Echoing Jennifer and Daniella here, I think it's individual and also community based. I've had so many people in my career and in my life be gracious towards me and take the time to invest in my success. And so I do my best to try and pay that forward. You can forget sometimes when you get caught up in your own world and trying to do research or build your network, but I'm constantly reminded by others on an individual basis of building community.
Jolie, how about you?
This is a hard question for me, because somebody asked in the chat about efforts to kill equity and diversity, and I suppose they're implying that we may need to worry that that people have their eye on us. So for me, it's just keeping my head down and continuing to do the work and trying to reach the people who most need to be reached. I think we fly a little under the radar here. We're not a Columbia University. We're not a Northeast private university. We're a public operation in a red state. And in some ways that that can be an advantage in that we don't get the same kind of scrutiny. So we just keep on doing the work, and we don't change the way we talk about the work that we do. We're not censoring ourselves. But I think I'm not on social media, trying to reach people who already know that this is important. I'm trying to reach mainly the students and the young people who need to hear from us, and the authors who need to hear from us.
That's so important. Thank you. And Dianne, we're going to give you the last word on this.
Yeah, I think the main keywords have been said: community, inclusion, reaching out to your fellow neighbor. I think it's very important to not look at the current state of the world around us and write it off as a doom situation. Because throughout human history, there have been very hard, scary times. And how have we made it through? We've made it through together. And if we're going to make it through now, we have to do it together. We need to be aware of our history. We need to be aware of how the people who came before us made it through. And we need to pass that along to our students who are going to come after our students, our young people who are going to come after us. We need to ask ourselves, what if the ways of the old world are ending, what do we want the new world to look like? What do we want it to include? And then we have to live that right now, even though it's hard, even though there are a lot of loud, scary voices out there shouting us down. We still have to do it. And that's as simple as helping your next door neighbor bring the groceries in and talking to them and learning their name. That's as simple as walking the 20 minutes to campus in the heat that starts in May and being a part of, because it's hot here, and being a part of whatever the First Generation Center puts on for their students. They have a end of semester for the graduating students, ceremony for them and all of their accomplishments. That's going to that. That's putting your walking shoes on and walking to campus and going to that. And offering your congratulations and telling them you're gonna do great. It's not being afraid to do what's right, even though it could be so easy to just stay quiet.
Thank you so much. That's really beautiful and important and inspiring. I often say that the right thing to do isn't always the easy thing to do, but that doesn't stop it from being the right thing to do. So with that, let's have another round of applause for our panelists.